in the beginning, I saw two types of teachers. Homotso, when we were together, I saw two type of teachers. And then I met people like you, and I realized that there are three type of teachers. When we met one another, I saw teachers who love their subject. I saw passionate maths teachers. I saw
Yeah.
passionate English teachers. We went through a lot of things, and yet they persevered because they love their
Yeah.
subject. But they didn't necessarily love their children. And that's the second group of teachers that I encountered. There were people, for me, hey, I was a Zulu teacher and I was an English teacher, but I was average. I'm
Yeah.
not a good, I won't tell you that I'm a good teacher, but I'll tell you that I love those children, those students with everything.
Mm.
That they get the subject knowledge by mistake sometimes. But they leave replenished in their
True.
spirits and their hearts, their motivation. They,
Yeah.
and that for me is the kind of teacher I am.
Okay.
I don't tell my boss or anything like that because they hired me because they think I can do the job. but then, Khomotso,
Mm.
I went into teaching in South Africa and I began to see, especially as a white person, I
Yeah.
began to understand education in a social context.
Ah.
I began to understand that the way I went to school as a white person was very different from the way in which many other South Africans experienced education.
Mm.
And, I had the opportunity to teach in Kwena, in
Yeah. I
the
remember
rural areas of
Kwena.
Mpumalanga.
Yeah.
And I got there and I understood for a moment, I understood. Um, well, let me begin by my misunderstanding. I get there to this
Misunderstanding. Yes.
environment. I get there to this environment, and the first thing I think about is, oh, you know what? If I just teach these young learners, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to teach them the best that I can.
Yeah.
And I came with my own idea of what teaching and learning was all about.
Ah.
I came with the idea that I am the teacher and they are the learners. And anytime things went wrong, it was because they did not want to learn what I had to teach them.
Mm.
And I was a complete failure. I was a complete
True.
failure
Yeah.
until I began to understand that they must teach me how to teach them.
True.
I need to be a learner. They need to be a teacher.
Mm.
And once we began to have that relationship, I can tell you I feel that I learned more than them. And they don't realize how much they taught me about how to
Mm.
teach them. I
Yeah.
understood I understood what teaching in essence was about. It was not just organized and systematic learning, as they say.
As they say,
It was not just depositing knowledge. It was a relationship
relationship. Yeah.
that began to be formed. So I want to get now to the third type of teacher, Homonso. I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I know you asked a
It's
question,
fine. You have to speak a lot so I can get your story.
but what I began to understand, Homonso,
Mm.
is that there were limitations to the effort that all of us as a school were putting in. There was a limitation to the effort that all these learners were putting in because the structure of our society was designed in such a way
Yeah.
that the education, it doesn't matter how much education these young people acquired, it doesn't matter how great they were, it was
Mm.
designed in a way that only a few of them would succeed.
True.
It was designed in such a way that they had to fight amongst themselves for small
Yeah.
advances amongst themselves. And so I began to understand, after reading the work of Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I began
Sure.
to understand that my job as a teacher is to work in the classroom, but also to work for the liberation of
Yeah.
myself and work with in alignment with my students, my learners. I am
Mm.
theirs and they are mine, in solidarity with them to transform uh, the environment, the
Yeah.
context And that is when we become human beings. I realized I was taught to teach as if they are objects, that the students are just passive individuals. And the more they imitate me, the more successful they become. And what I had to learn was that knowledge must be critically thought about. It must be not only consumed, but it must be engaged with critically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we start to do that, that is when we begin to humanize all of us, when we begin to think about that. So that's why I don't necessarily talk about teachers, because I think teachers are part of the problem of perpetuating injustice in society. But transformers, teaching for transformation, is the type of teaching that begins to talk about power, begins to talk about knowledge, begins to think about what it means to be an African and live that. So that's my short answer to your short question, my brother.